If you have used Olympus cameras for years, you already know that Zuiko lenses were never just about specifications. They were known for compact designs, serious weather sealing, and optical performance that often exceeded expectations. But now that Olympus has become OM-System, the real question is whether that same philosophy still exists. So I bought 3 modern M.Zuiko lenses to find out which one genuinely continues the Olympus legacy, and which one feels like it belongs to a completely different system. You are watching AltBuzz Lenses. Subscribe for honest stories about the lenses photographers use, trust, and sometimes question. At number 3, we have the M.Zuiko Digital ED 12 to 100mm f4 Pro. I bought this lens first because it is the clearest expression of an idea Olympus spent 2 decades refining. One lens, replacing an entire bag. The math is almost unfair to every other system. 12 to 100 millimeters, a 24 to 200 millimeter equivalent range. Constant f4 the whole way through, lens stabilization for handheld shooting, and close focusing down to 0.15 meters at the wide end. It carries compatible Sync IS support for even steadier handheld results, along with weather-resistant PRO construction built to shrug off rain and dust on longer outings. The zoom mechanism stays internal, keeping the balance consistent whether you are framing a wide landscape or pulling in on a distant detail. It has remained part of the current lineup for years now, not because nothing newer exists, but because nothing newer replaces it. What became clear the moment I started reading through the specification sheet was that this lens was never designed to be small in isolation. It was designed to be small relative to what it replaces. A wide landscape lens, a standard zoom, and a short telephoto, folded into a single weather-sealed body. That is the specification that matters most here. More than sharpness charts, more than corner performance. Think about what a travel kit usually demands. A body, a wide lens, a mid-range zoom, maybe a short telephoto for portraits or details. Each one adding weight, each one adding a lens change at exactly the wrong moment. This lens quietly removes that entire negotiation. There is also something to be said for how this range behaves across genres, rather than within just one. Architecture benefits from the wide end and the weather sealing in equal measure. Environmental portraits benefit from the reach at the long end without needing a completely separate lens. Documentary work, the kind where you do not get a second chance at a moment, benefits from never having to choose which lens to mount before you leave the hotel room. This is not versatility as a marketing word. It is versatility as an operational decision that changes what you carry and what you miss. The compromise is honest and worth naming. A constant f4 aperture is not built for isolating a subject with a razor-thin background, and it will ask more of your camera's sensitivity once the light starts to fade. Stabilization helps you hold the camera steady. It does nothing for a subject that will not sit still. Some photographers will still prefer a shorter, brighter zoom for exactly this reason, and that preference is not wrong. But for the photographer who wants to leave 3 lenses at home and still come back with everything they needed, this is where the Olympus formula reveals itself most clearly. It does not preserve the legacy by being the smallest lens in the bag. It preserves it by making much of the rest of the bag unnecessary. The 12 to 100 earns its size by replacing several smaller lenses. The next lens takes the opposite approach. It offers a kind of reach few systems can match, but it demands more space and weight than many photographers associate with Micro Four Thirds. At number 2, we have the M.Zuiko Digital ED, 150 to 600mm f5 to f6.3 IS. This was the lens that made the Olympus legacy question much harder to answer. 150 to 600 millimeters. A 300 to 1200 millimeter equivalent field of view. 5-axis Sync IS, IPX1 rated weather resistance, and a listed weight of roughly 2,065 grams. It supports both compatible teleconverters, pushing the equivalent field of view as far as 2400 millimeters for subjects that refuse to come any closer. Close focusing capability opens up field macro possibilities that most super telephoto lenses never consider. It mounts directly without an adapter, keeping autofocus speed and tracking fully native to the system rather than borrowed from somewhere else. The reason I bought it was to test the most extreme version of the reach advantage this format promises. Does a 1200mm equivalent field of view justify carrying something that, in the hand, feels closer to a full-sized super telephoto than a compact system lens? Up to 7 stops of compatible stabilization become essential here, not optional, because at 600mm, even breathing can blur a frame. Teleconverter support pushes the field of view even further, toward a 2400mm equivalent, for the moments when 600 still is not enough. Reach like this changes what counts as a subject in the first place. A bird on a distant branch, an animal you cannot approach without disturbing it, an aircraft crossing overhead. All of it becomes accessible in a way that would otherwise demand renting or borrowing far more specialized equipment. That access is the entire argument for this lens, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed as excess. At the same time, framing a subject at 600mm, or further with a teleconverter attached, is genuinely difficult. The field of view narrows so much that simply finding what you are looking for through the viewfinder becomes its own skill, separate from focus or exposure entirely. What I will not do is pretend its size is incidental. At roughly 2 kilograms, this lens changes how you carry your kit, how long you can shoot handheld, whether a monopod becomes a requirement rather than a convenience. Its dimensions and overall concept sit closer to the conventional super telephoto market than most photographers expect from an M.Zuiko lens. That is not a flaw to hide. It is the honest cost of the reach it delivers. This lens continues part of the Olympus legacy through weather sealing and stabilized handheld capability, but it challenges that legacy through bulk, through a physical identity that no longer whispers compact system the way Olympus lenses once did. The verdict here is not a failure. It is a trade-off, reach traded directly for the portability Olympus built its name on. If a channel like this means anything to you, this is a good moment to subscribe. There is one lens left, and it might be the one that settles the entire question. At number 1, we have the M.Zuiko Digital ED 50 to 200mm f2.8 S Pro. This is the lens that finally made the 3-lens experiment feel complete. 50 to 200mm, a 100 to 400mm equivalent range at a constant f2.8. 1,075 grams without the tripod adapter, up to 7 stops of compatible Sync IS, and IP53 certified weather sealing. A minimum focusing distance of 0.78 meters brings genuine close-up capability to a lens built primarily for distance. It supports up to 0.5 times magnification at the equivalent full-frame scale without any teleconverter attached at all. Both the shorter and longer teleconverters remain fully compatible, and it was introduced as one of the only weather-sealed options in its exact combination of range and aperture at the time it launched. The reason I bought this lens last was to see whether OM System could produce something larger, something more expensive, and still use the format intelligently, rather than simply imitating a full-frame telephoto. It is not a small lens by any honest measure, but it is substantially lighter than the 600mm option, while offering a full stop of extra light throughout its entire range. It supports both the shorter and longer teleconverters, extending its reach without immediately forcing a purchase of something else entirely. Here is where the aperture conversation needs precision rather than shortcuts. This lens remains f2.8 for exposure, full stop. It supports faster shutter speeds than an f4 or f5.6 lens under identical light, and depth of field comparisons depend entirely on framing, distance, and format, not on some universal equivalence formula. The smaller sensor can actually offer more depth of field at an equivalent framing, which becomes a genuine advantage for wildlife and close focusing work, not a limitation to apologize for. That extra depth of field is not a compromise here. For a photographer trying to keep an entire bird in focus, not just one eye, It is the format doing exactly what it should. It is worth sitting with what this combination actually means in practice. A brighter aperture at 400mm equivalent reach means shooting action in fading light without immediately reaching for a higher sensitivity setting. It means a shutter speed fast enough to freeze a wing mid-flap when the light behind the trees has already started to fade. Very few systems, at any sensor size, offer this exact pairing of speed and reach in something you can still carry on a shoulder strap for a full day without your back reminding you of it later. Set beside the shorter 40 to 150mm f2.8, this lens trades compactness for reach and integrated stabilization. Set beside the 150 to 600, it trades maximum reach for a dramatically brighter aperture and a body that remains realistic to carry all day. The price is real, and so is the overlap with lenses some photographers already own. But the 12 to 100 preserves the Olympus formula, and the 150 to 600 tests how far that formula can stretch. The 50 to 200 is the lens that develops it, taking the familiar priorities, weather protection, stabilization, optical ambition, and portability relative to capability, and applying them to a professional range Olympus never offered in this form before. Which of these three feels most faithful to what Olympus used to stand for? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe to AltBuzz Lenses for the next story. The name changed, the question never did.